are these people?
So this is, and I have the name with me, Mahmoud Abbas. This guy right here, part of the Palestinian Authority, right? You know, essentially president of that. One of. I'm sure I'm getting the details of that a little wonky, but I'm sure people will tell me. And then everyone knows this guy. That's Antony, good old Antony Blinken. So I'm sure that meeting probably was super good for Palestine. But this is out of the Electronic Intifada, right? Tamara Nassar writing, talking about how the Palestinian Authority kills its own people and proves loyalty to Israel. So after the ceasefire deal, this is likely to be the, main suspect of who's in charge there. So, which we're going to get to. But they write, it has been over a month since the Palestinian Authority launched a deadly military operation in the Jenin refugee camp in the northern occupied West Bank. Okay? So far, at least 14 people, including 6 members of the PA forces, have been killed during the operation, which is purportedly targeting armed Palestinians in the camp with the aim of disarming them. But just like the Israeli assaults, on which it appears to be modeled, the violence and siege tactics indiscriminately harm local residents. Those killed among Palestinian residents of the camp include a father and his teenage son, as well as a female Palestinian journalist. Refugee camps in the northern occupied West Bank, including Ner Shams camp and Tulkarm, Al-Farah in Tubas, Balata in Nablus, and the Jenin refugee camp, have been the emergence of armed Palestinian groups to counter Israeli encroachment and land grabs and defend camp residents from Israeli attacks. Since Israel began its genocide of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip on the 7th of October, it has also carried out repeated raids on the refugee camps in the West Bank. The raids have included aerial bombardments, the destruction of roads and essential infrastructure like water and electricity, and the killing of both armed Palestinian fighters and civilians, including children. The deadly campaign in Jenin appears to be a bid by the Palestinian Authority to demonstrate its loyalty and effectiveness to its Israeli overlords, as well as the incoming U.S. administration under President-elect Donald Trump. The PA has, since its creation in the mid-1990s, maintained close cooperation with the Israeli occupation forces under the banner of security coordination. Baked into the Oslo Accords, under which the PA was created, is its obligation to fight Palestinian resistance, which Israel terms terror, on Israel's behalf. The PA's renewed demonstration of loyalty comes amid reports of its ambition to be involved in governing Gaza in a post-ceasefire scenario. Right? So that's now, apparently. This apparently complete with similar Emirati ambitions. The United Arab Emirates discussed with the United States the possibility that it would participate in a provisional administration until a reformed PA is able to govern. Reuters reported last week, citing a dozen foreign diplomats and Western officials. So now that ceasefire is a thing, look out for that kind of stuff. The UAE will not participate in any plan that fails to include significant reform of the Palestinian Authority, its empowerment, and the establishment of a credible roadmap toward a Palestinian state, a UAE official told Reuters. The PA felt marginalized by Emirati ambitions, which appeared more aligned with Trump's wishes. This frustration prompted the PA to launch the large-scale, deadly raid in Jenin rather than a smaller operation in Tulkarm initially recommended by the U.S. According to the publication Middle East Eye, citing the unnamed officials, both current and former, from Egypt, the U.S., and Israel. For the PA, Emirati or American ambitions to be realized in Gaza, Israel would first need to achieve its declared military objectives, an outcome that remains far-fetched. Such plans don't always go as expected and may prove as short-lived as the ill-fated 230 million pier off Gaza's coast, which was built by the United States under discrete objectives before the project was abandoned and the pier partially drifted ashore in Ashdod, southern Israel. Israel's extremist right-wing politicians publicly undermined the PA despite its close collaboration with Israel, because controlled ops are needed. The military campaign in Jenin is a clear example of acting in Israel's behest, and Israel and the U.S. appear content with the PA's deadly performance. Israel has been surprised by the determination shown by the Palestinian security forces during the fighting, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing an unnamed Israeli security official. The PA is now requesting that the U.S. approve a 4-year, $680 million plan to train its forces and boost its ammunition and armored vehicles. Unnamed American and PA sources revealed to the publication Middle East Eye. All this weaponry is solely to be used against fellow Palestinians. PA officials requested in the meeting that their needs for armored vehicles and ammunition be met urgently in light of the difficulty of the clashes and their inability to resolve the situation in the Jenin camp. The request made in mid-December during a meeting with U.S. officials in the PA Ministry of Interior in Ramallah came with expressions of frustration from the Palestinian side over the U.S. failure to fill its commitments, including arming PA forces and approving funding for PA prisons in Nablus and Bethlehem. In the areas of occupied territory where the PA is nominal control, Palestinian forces are only allowed to arrest other Palestinians. They cannot touch Israeli soldiers or settlers who attack Palestinians. PA prisons anywhere in the West Bank are predominantly used for jailing Palestinians who dare to resist Israel's military occupation. This means in practice that the PA exists to protect Israel and its settlers and to police Palestinians on Israel's behalf. The PA's key role in suppressing Palestinian protest and resistance to Israel's military occupation is one reason why the U.S. and European states fund it. The PA's request for additional funding and arms made sense because the U.S. has been pressing the PA for months to ramp up security operations in the occupied West Bank. The publication reported, citing a former U.S. intelligence official. So these meetings tend to happen with, Palestinian Authority. I'm sure nothing can go wrong with meeting these people. Just this picture also I just had to bring because it explains so much. Ugh. Like, anyway.
Sit down. Like, you look.
I know, dude. They look like fucking monsters. What are you doing? Like, anyway. Mirroring Israeli military tactics during the raids, PA forces sealed off the camp's entrances and stationed themselves inside homes and a hospital in the Jenin camp. Nearly 2,000 camp residents were forcibly displaced to nearby areas. 2,000 people just have to go somewhere else. The remaining Palestinians in the camp have been struggling to meet basic needs. The UN monitoring group OCHA reported grocery stores are running out of supplies and residents have had little access to water. Over 60% of the Jenin camp's population is affected by faulty water networks, which have been damaged by successive Israeli assaults, and the PA's assault has halted repair work. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees was forced to suspend its services in the camp for nearly 3 weeks. 4 UNRWA schools have been shuttered in the camp since the 9th of December, leaving 1,600 students out of school for weeks. For nearly 2 weeks, an UNRWA health center in the camp was temporarily occupied by armed Palestinians. The PA raid resulted in significant infrastructural damage, with nearly 30 homes burned and water tanks and generators damaged. UNRWA was also forced to suspend solid waste management, leading to accumulating waste. A young Palestinian journalist, 21-year-old Shatha Sabag, was killed after being shot in the head outside her home on the 28th of December. OCHA said it remains unclear whether she was shot by Palestinian forces or armed Palestinians. I'm betting we know which one. But the journalist's family was unambiguous in laying blame on the PA. So, Lawyers for Justice reports that journalist Jarrah Khalaf is being tortured in the Palestinian Authority's prisons due to his coverage of the ongoing PA crackdown on the Jenin refugee camp. So, these things like this are still happening. Palestinian Authority forces seized an anti-tank weapon during their raid and handed it over to the Israeli army, Israel's Channel 14 reported. We can congratulate the security authorities, said the Israeli journalist Hillel Bitan Rasin. Over the course of the raid, Palestinian Authority forces said they arrested nearly 250 individuals and defused around 250 improvised explosive devices, which are often planted by resistance groups along the roads. These devices have been more widely used by the armed resistance in the northern areas to resist Israeli invasions into the refugee camps and neighborhoods. During successive Israeli raids to the camps, bulldozers ravaged through the streets, destroying civil infrastructure, commercial stores, and residential areas. This damages water and sewage networks and impedes movement, including ambulances trying to reach the injured. Through this destruction of critical infrastructure is carried out under the guise of uprooting explosive devices from roads, Palestinians have interpreted these practices to be vengeful policies of collective punishment. Earlier this month, the PA ordered all operations by the Qatari broadcaster Al Jazeera in the occupied West Bank halted. After decisions by the PA's Culture, Interior, and Communications Ministry, several Al Jazeera websites were also shut down for 4 months. PA security personnel handed an official order to Al Jazeera staff before shutting the Ramallah office. The footage and the interaction was a repeat of the situation in September when Israeli soldiers on live broadcast arrived at the network's Ramallah office and handed the bureau head, Walid al-Amari, a notice to shut it down. So, closing thoughts, Care Bear? You know, I brought it just because, like, this is, with that ceasefire deal, we got these guys running things now, I'm betting. So, you know, incongruency with the UAE and
controlled opposition.
Generally, yes. So, not great, but yeah. So, anything else you want to add before we head out of here?
I mean, again, as much as I hate talking about Israel, I think this week was especially needed. But I think even though that each of these sections that we did tonight, they were different in terms of the topic in of itself, but it all led to. But there were similar themes in all of them, and how they connected together, and how ceasefire deal is connected to all of these things, which again, mainstream is definitely not going to talk about. Not even sure even some of our colleagues in independent media have talked about, and some have, but I don't think they see like how they all are connected. That the idea to assume that the ceasefire is actually a good thing, and I don't think they do, but I think the way that they kind of tweet at it as if our government is capable of doing good is seemingly is kind of in a lot of ways a disservice to our audience and their audience, that it's meaningful than it really is. And I think you and I know better, and I think often, but it's, yeah, as I said, it's just very sad that it almost seems like people have not learned anything. Or at least, but I think the idea is it's okay. Like, don't be so jaded that you can't find a joy in things. Like, even for me, as I did in the last segment, I had to bring in that clip of the Palestinian children celebrating. Like, I'm not a dick. Like, I'm not going to tell a child not to have joy. Like, I'm a fucking teacher. Like, my job is to create the conditions where joy can
continue
abound. So ideally, so if children are having joy in something, as long as it's safe, They deserve to have it. But we have to kind of seep that in some reality of, you know, have your joy when you can, especially right now. Like, these kids have not had joy ever.
No.
So to have experienced that even just for a moment, I'm not gonna say, no, they can't do this, all of that. Like, no, have it. You deserve it. And tomorrow we gotta do
Get back to
work.
work.
And so
Well,
and I think, I felt like I've been saying this a lot over the last few weeks. y- You know, it's time to get to work. And for some of
yep.
us, it might mean you need to figure out what the work is. And I think that's kind of where we are even right now in the space. I think people are trying to recalibrate and try to figure themselves out now in terms of this new administration and what that would entail. And I feel like I think this year, and kind of said this, it's going to be interesting in terms of how people are going to respond and ultimately react, keyword react, to things which in the moment might not be wise. I think it's also something to be said of, and I'm cautious by nature when I probably shouldn't be as much, but I think it's a healthy thing at times to be cautious. You don't have to report on a story right away. Like, there is, I think, some decency in a way to kind of wait until like you get more information and then
Yep.
report on it based on the information that you get. But I think it's just the idea of like people wanting to react because it's the new thing and in the hope that people are going to talk about. Now, in this case, we kind of got lucky because normally we do the show midweek. We either get the tail end or like right at the beginning, like when things are
Yeah.
popping off, and it's never usually a middle point. Um, but it's okay to be nuanced. And in many ways, I almost prefer to be nuanced on where it's necessary. So, so I think even in this, yeah, we can not say celebrate, but understand why people are having joy right now, if not for a moment, and let them have it. But don't misconstrue that joy as an ongoing permanency. That is not. And it's a temporary respite, which I get. So know that, allow the people to have that. And tomorrow, and definitely heading into next week and the next few years,
Yeah.
Will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the topic of Gaza will probably pop up, not pop up, but like decrease. Like, or maybe increase because Trump is going to, so maybe people might care slightly more.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, as Fee said, it probably will go back to pre October 7th era, where even when I was coming into the space, it was like Gaza was something like, if you really were in the know,
Yeah.
you would
Occasionally
know.
people would
And
talk about it, right?
right. And to have you talk about Gaza or Israel would be kind of like, what the fuck? Like, what? Why you care? Like, that's kind of where I kind of came in the space at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine more likely, or at least they'll try to return it to that. But I think the damage is done already. I think Israel has shown their ass. People are aware, and they won't be the same. It's just a question of now, how would our government, by way of respond now, which gives me fear
Yeah.
because we know, and we'll probably be as prepared as we can be, but the masses are not. And the implications of that, I'm very concerned about. But we'll learn and we'll report on that, I'm sure, as time goes on.
Yep. And talking about those things are why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code on your screen, go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, go down in that description and leave us a little donation, help keep the lights on. But, otherwise, just like and subscribe, hit the share button. Let us know what you think. How bad is the PA going to fuck shit up this time? But, otherwise, thanks for watching.